into this now, and Royal AM players returned to training yesterday following confirmation from the club that players had indeed been paid. While this may signal the end of the current payment dispute, the club still remains under curatorship as uncertainty lingers at the club. With the funds still under the control of a curator, what recourse is available to players if they are not paid again this month, particularly with the transfer window now nearing a close? And is this the end of the saga? Well, Sowetan Sports editor Nkareng Matshe joins me now to take a closer look at the unfolding situation. Nkareng, thank you so much for making time for us. And perhaps before we move forward in terms of what the future holds, let's take a step back. An unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in, where a club is under the curatorship of the South African Revenue Services. But how did we find ourselves here? You've written quite extensively about it in terms of perhaps a situation that could have been avoided if we're looking at the build-up of events involving TTM as well as Bloemfontein Celtic.
Good morning and good morning to your viewers. Yeah, it's indeed something that we didn't envisage when Mamchize bought Bloem Celtic 4 years ago. Remember that Celtic themselves had problems, had salary issues, they had income issues, they had tax issues, but not to this scale. It never reached a situation whereby the contract, like their accounts, were frozen by SARS. But they did have issues, we reported on them. So the situation seemed to improve for the players because suddenly their salaries were guaranteed. You remember that when they were paid bonuses on the pitch. So we didn't think that there would be any cash flow problems at Royal EM. So for some of the players, it's happening for the second time, and they had thought they had put that behind them. But look, football is a very expensive business. It's not something that you can just throw your money at all the time. There's simply no return on investment. So you have to use your other business avenues to fund the club. And all the PSL club owners will tell you, you require 40 to 50 million rand every season to run a club. Now you get only half of that, like 20, 25 million rand from the PSL. So you have to find the other balance from your other business sources so that you can balance the books. If you don't do that, you are going to experience what we have seen with Royal EM. But what is more disappointing here is that it's not like it's the club that is at fault. It is the business ties of Mamchize, which have nothing to do with football, as we explained in our stories last week. So she finds herself in a pickle in terms of SARS because she has not, allegedly she has not fulfilled her tax obligations. So the club, because it belongs to her, it's under her, it finds itself in this problem. And then it's quite unfortunate because it brings the PSL into question as to how this situation was allowed to fester, because it's not like it's a surprise. We remember that the reserves team has not been playing for the last 6 months because they didn't have sufficient players, and they had a FIFA transfer ban as well in the last 2 years. So the problems have been there, and the PSL they are familiar with the problems.
Let's take a look at what the future might look like then for the club, because you're mentioning the existing FIFA ban. It's a transfer window now, and reports coming in thick and fast that players are starting to look for options and perhaps a way to get themselves released from the club, so at least they're able to join another club on a free and avoid the financial woes that have been following Royal AM. Now, without players at your disposal, can they then continue to fulfill fixtures and make it to the end of the season?
Well, look, the players, we have to commend them because they've been courageous in pitching for games. It's only now that they didn't get their salary. So those who have remained have been very courageous, and they have been able to compete. Remember that last season they survived relegation, I think, on the last day. So even now they are not bottom of the log. So it shows that they are committed. Those who are there are committed. It's natural for players to look for stability, to look for a club where they can be free, they can just enjoy the game and not worry about matters which have nothing to do with them, which have nothing to do with the performance. So the players is natural. It's just a natural thing that they would send feelers and make queries about whether it's possible for them to leave. But they have done that in the last 2 seasons. But those who have remained have been very committed. And it's not like there's a lot of employment in football. There are so many players who left clubs. They had their contracts terminated at the end of last season. Even today, they still are searching for clubs. So it's difficult for those who are looking to leave and join clubs which do not need reinforcements. You need to go where you are wanted, basically. So we just hope that now that the salaries have been paid and they are back at training, their next match is on January 22 against Orlando Pirates. So those who are back at training, then hopefully they can focus on the job. Coaches like Maduka, who have had to ride the wave this storm, and they've been dedicated to producing results even in difficult circumstances.
So let's hold it there for a second and perhaps bring in Kabelo Mashigo, who is, of course, a sports lawyer, as we look to unpack this a bit further. Kabelo, thank you so much for making time for us. We're speaking about the options available to players, and if you're looking at a club that is under curatorship, there is recourse offered in terms of FIFA Article 14 bis, should the players not be paid again this month. Tell us a bit more about then the options that would be available and the circumstances under which they would be able to ask to be released from the club.
Morning, Andy, and morning to the viewers as well. I think in relation to the application of Article 14 bis, have been paid for 2 consecutive or at least amounts adding up to 2 consecutive salaries. As things stand, I think right now the club has made the payment, which means that at this stage they now have reverted back to zero, cannot be used in this particular matter in relation to the termination of those specific employment contracts. However, 14 itself, Article 14 of the FIFA regulations on the status and transfer of players can be used, but also in dealing with that, you'd have to look at the circumstances of each case and have to apply that going forward.
Well, for the benefit of our viewers, of course, that deals with players that have not been paid for a period of 2 months or more. In fact, it's a late payment or non-payment. So in that instance, if they get late payment or no payment again this month, they could possibly invoke the provisions there. But let's look then at the curatorship and what this means, Kabelo, because the payment then is an obligation of the club. But in this instance, it seems like their hands are tied. They can always say, we want to pay the players, but it's the curator that has the funds. How does one get their way out of this situation?
Okay. So in this particular case, because the club has a curator who's essentially a middleman in terms of the payments and running of the club, the financial aspects of it. With that being said, the curator in this particular case is now being blamed for the non-payment of the salaries. And if that can be proved, then Royal AM can simply state that in this particular case, they have not repudiated the contracts. They were not in breach of the contract because a third party who has been appointed by the courts in terms of a court order was in a position in which they were put to not be able to pay these salaries. I think the funds now, as indicated, have been released in whatever situation that might be. And going forward, the club is now in a position where, should the situation unfold as it did in this particular December month, then they have a position in which they can say that, look, the funds are now being controlled by a third party. We are able to pay salaries when we get the money from the club. It is this curator who's paying these amounts, and we shouldn't be held liable for the late payments or non-payments in specific circumstances.
So in short, it does seem like the hands of the players are tied somewhat because they can't rely on repudiation and at the same time can't really leave the club, but we'll have to wait in faith that they will get paid. Quickly, Nkareng, as we wrap things up then, how would you like to see this matter being resolved? Of course, you've raised a couple of issues and stages at which this could have been managed better. If you're looking ahead then to the end of the season and how things are likely to unfold, how would you like this to be managed to ensure that perhaps there will be an end to the season with 16 teams still in the Premier League?
Look, if they pay the players and they survive, which would be a miracle, then they need to get their house in order. And the PSL has to force its hand to say to the owners, can you really afford this club, or should we help you find a backer who can then rescue you from the situation? Because the tax issues are not going to run away. They've been there for some time, even before Royal EM became a premiership club. The tax affairs of Mamkhize have been well documented. So the PSL now has to strengthen its hand and approach and say, do you really want to continue like this? Because we have tolerated it for some time and we can't do it anymore. So maybe the possibility of finding another investor and then you do due diligence to say whether this person can afford to be in the premiership, because it's an attractive status to have a PSL club and all that. But the cost, as I said earlier, can run into over 50 million rand every season, and you're only getting half from the league, and then you have to really dig deep into your own pockets.
Nkareng, apologies, I will have to jump in here because we are out of time, but I do certainly think there would be options available there. Not for the players, though, in this transfer window, because it does seem they'll be rooted there at Royal AM. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time.